guys, square file and chisel bit chain. There's a lot of good video out there. I'm not going to repeat a whole bunch of stuff that's already good stuff out there. Thought I'd try to fill in a few gaps. First off, there's 4 different kinds of files or shapes of files out there. That's a model of a single bevel. I made up a rather crude model of what's called a double bevel. There's a goofy, you see there, with almost similar to your double bevel, but just a rounded edge there. They don't have that sharp corner. And then there's a 6-sided triangle file. If you're just getting into this, personal opinion, I'd recommend starting off with your goofy file. A little more forgiving on your file wearing out on you, getting the angles right. But the square ground issue is precision. Round filing, you know, we've all round filed, and you see guys doing a little twist of the file, and there's a little rocking here and there, and it's fine, round filing. Chisel bit filing has got to be precise. There's a great video out there from Steel that shows a really neat little jig, how to use a bench vise with a little piece of tin. It's a great little jig for holding the tooth still. A couple things that I think are missing with the how-tos out there. I thought I'd start with the fundamental. There's 3 angles you set your file up at. That's your starting line. So if I were to take my file here, all 3 angles are 45 degrees. So I'm going to take that file, and I'm actually coming way back here, 45 degrees to your bar. You drop the file 45 degrees, and then you tip the file 45 degrees. I'll switch ends here. I'm going to try to illustrate with the double bevel. So again, 45 back, 45 down, tip your file 45 degrees, and that's basically your starting point. Here's the tricky part. It's maintaining that 5-degree forward tip to the side plate cutting edge. The reason I say that's tricky part, a couple things happening. Because of that top plate being sloped down, that side plate can actually be 90 degrees to your bar, and it's going to look like it's leaning forward simply because your top plate's leaning backwards like that, leaning down. So I always say put your file right 90 degrees to your bar, and be sure, if I could, something like a straight edge here, if the log is your bar, make sure you hold your file 90 degrees to your bar, and that side cutting edge leans forward 5 degrees. Your factory grind, if you look at new chain right off the roll, they grind at 90 degrees to your bar. Doesn't work so good. What happens, you got to understand what's going on when that tooth is going through the log. The tooth does not travel in a straight line down your bar. When that tooth hooks into the wood, that working corner grabs your fiber, the tooth will actually cock backwards slightly. You know, it's hooked onto your chain, of course, but that'll tip back just a little bit. So if your side plate is 90 degrees to the bar to begin with, when it hooks into the wood, your side plate will be leaning backwards slightly. So you want to lean it forward 5 degrees so that when the tooth is tipped backwards slightly, it's actually hitting the fiber at a 90-degree angle. How that angle is changed is simply the tipping of your file here. This I find is the trickiest part, trying to hand file. Maintaining that file angle here so that you're keeping that side plate tipped forward 5 degrees. What I see happen, it's really not the fault of the filer. What happens is the files, because you have a very kind of a weak corner here on a chisel bit file on your double bevel, what will happen is you watch your file and you're going to see that corner there will start getting shiny, which means it's losing its cutting edge. When that cutting edge is no longer longer cutting steel right there. Each stroke of your file, the file is going to keep walking up. And you'll have a really hard time trying to get the steel, get that edge right there to cut the bottom of that tooth out. So your file starts to ride high, and then that corner starts to go above your working corner on the tooth. What'll happen is the guys will start to chase your cutting edges by tipping the file back each stroke. Side plate leans backwards, no good. Filing out of the tooth or into the tooth. All the instructions I see, everybody's filing. I shouldn't say everybody, but what I see for the most part, they're filing down into the tooth. That's fine, but just remember, you've got your sharp cutting edges on the file going into the chrome on the tooth. I learned it by learned hand filing by going out of the tooth. The way I do it is I'll set my saw up against the log, take my file. First off, back up a step. I'm going to loosen the bar nuts and I'm going to tighten the chain up. So my chain tension is a lot tighter than what I run it at normally cutting wood. The issue is I don't want that tooth moving. So the chain tension really tight, and I'll put the tooth right here, right where it starts to go, just before it goes around the tip of the bar. That's where I found it the most secure. Then, when I'm filing, I'm looking at the inside of the tooth. And what I want, I'm hoping this will come through for you guys, is a line going from the working corner down into that bottom corner of the tooth where the side plate and the top plate come together. That forms a distinct corner, or a corner there. That's what I'm looking at as I'm filing. And then we got to remember that slight little tip this way and that way is what's keeping that side plate where it should be. 5 degrees forward, I find, works the best. If it's leaned too much forward, your chain is basically going to start acting like a round file chain. You've got a weaker working corner. Cutting edges will work, you'll cut, but your point, when you lose that point, the chain no longer hooks into the fiber. You've got to start pushing on the saw to make it cut into the wood, and you basically feel like your chain has gone dull, but in fact it's just the point that you've lost. The other is, getting back to that, your file going dull on that corner, is you can start to push it down. You start to rock the file that way, and your side plate's going to start leaning backwards. And basically your tooth isn't going to want to hook into the wood. It's pushing itself away from the fiber. So that's the way I learned how to do it in the woods. Work up a system that works for you. But hopefully a couple of those ideas there will kind of fill in some gaps from what I've seen out there in the instruction world, in the video world. Take care, guys. Be safe.